I believe you've got a secret to share with us, which is not necessarily a secret, just that a lot of people out there might not think about it, might not know about it, or actually have been doing it for years, like yourself, but need a new level of awareness. And I believe the buzzword is decarbonisation. Tell me more about this.
Okay. In terms of decarbonisation, it's really about what we can seek to incorporate into our schemes to reduce the extent of carbon use during the life cycle of the building. How can we actually get those things into a scheme? So in reality, some of this stuff, as you say, we've been doing for years. So things like green roofs and that sort of thing.
Right.
You know, we've put, I think it's at least 3 green roofs on some of our jobs this year. That's spread across, you know, new private housing.
Yeah.
Or the interesting one that we actually put a green roof on was actually an existing commercial premise. Which
tell me about that.
Well, that was a high street premise, historic in the way that it's 100 years old.
Yeah.
On a historic high street. Excuse me, but the back area is an extension, and with that we've taken the use of this unit, and it's gone from being what was a bookshop into now being a coffee shop with a pottery, with a coffee roastery, and in terms of its use overall. But at what is the ground floor roof, so first floor level, when you actually, when you look through there, we've put a green roof on the back of the building.
What does that consist of?
I'm not going to be blatant with you. It's effectively a waterproof membrane with soil on top, and then plants.
Right. Okay. Because when you say to me green roof, I'm thinking, is it got grass and flowers, and is it pretty, or are we talking like
grass and flowers? Grass and flowers. You wouldn't necessarily put your mower up on it, although you can. You've got to make sure you get it watered in the dry times. Now, you know, you can put the green roof up there. That enhances insulation, believe it or not.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It reduces the heat absorption from the sun.
Yeah.
Into the space, so it helps you actually stay cooler in there, and it actually improves your air quality on where you are.
Right. So I'm just going to jump in from a personal, bit selfish perspective. My office here has got a flat roof. Okay. Yeah. Now it's well insulated, and I work in here, 24/7, 12 months of the year. But in the winter it gets cold, and in the summer it is roasting.
Okay. Well, yeah, a green roof would probably benefit you.
Right.
With that, the only things I would say to you is just check your loadings. In terms of the weight of the thing up there, because if you think of your thickness of your soil and everything else that you've got up there, that it can be a slight weight. But
I'll hire a project manager. I know a good one.
Let me know. And with that, certainly that'd be something that you can sort of consider.
Yeah.
One of the local councils that we've been working with, looking at their housing stock provision and what we can do to decarbonise that. So we're changing out boilers for heat pumps. Yeah. We're relining external walls and things like that to actually bring their insulation levels up. So that's decarbonisation in practice. And in terms of actually existing stock as well, not just
I always
don't
want to talk to my wife because she'll be all over this when we build our house. But these are the things that I look at programs, and you see, old buildings being renovated. You see, I'm crazy on grand designs, and I look at what they're doing, and I'm like, but building the house into the landscape, and and you see all of this. I'm like, it would be lovely, it would be beautiful, and I'm thinking, would it be expensive, but would it be better in the long run? Because I've worked with people in the past who do heat source, air pumps and things like that. I remember very specifically a client, and we were on site recording for them and all this stuff, and it was just like, it makes so much sense that actually it worked for caveman back in the day. Okay, why are we not using that and helping our planet at the same time?
Yeah, yeah. Some of the most interesting stuff that I ever looked at was actually subterranean housing,
Okay,
and a very renowned architect, Arthur Cornby, was actually working on it.
yeah,
He'd done some. He lived in a house up near Huddersfield, which was literally under the Dales there, and
wow,
that was really interesting. But it was a great learning experience. But I'm
mm,
talking 20 years ago, 20 odd years ago
right,
when we looked at that then. But those principles, if you like, are now been brought forward with other things. So it's it's an interesting subject. And as I say,
mm,
you hear that word and people think, well, what's that then? But
yes,
in reality, some of the stuff we've been doing all the way along, some of the stuff's new. So, if you look at the sort of innovative sort of technologies that you've got coming forwards, the use of BIM, which is building information modeling, that helps
okay,
with better coordination, which then helps in integrating the actual design and the management and the resource allocation, if you like,
yeah,
across that building, which will then um, help you actually sort of manage your carbon input.
okay,
If you think about using highly recycled materials, now not necessarily in their primary use, they could be a secondary. So old car tires, things like
yeah,
that, suddenly become decking boards and that sort of
yeah,
thing. So rather than sending them to landfill, they're getting a reuse, or even in their primary use. Some quite often we use furniture, tabletops and things like that, which have come from previous usage, but they've
yeah,
got life to them, and they've got. Um, One of my favourites was we used made the whole bar top out of what was a cheese factory's shelves. So they'd had
really,
cheese stored on them all over the years, and they'd got that natural sort of wax and
yeah,
everything else ingrained in it where it had been stored there, and from that they used it for another use. Now that's reusing, recycling, but
yeah,
that was quite good in terms of what it is, and I just thought it was fascinating that we could bring that sort of stuff through, and how it got paid a premium because of the quality of the product.
I can imagine. And
Um,
I'm now looking at my backdrop, and I'm like, where you see that red scarf there, that's copper piping, and it's
yeah,
and they're what do you call it, scaffolding boards.
yeah,
And I love that look, and the guy did it. It cost me an arm and a leg, but but it could be done, and that piece is it's been there for since I've had this office, and
yeah.
it's aesthetically pleasing, it's on trend, if you will, and we sustainable.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, there's that side of it, but also you got to look at your advanced insulation materials. So,
mm,
as I say again, going back to that council project, it was
yeah,
it was plasterboard fallbacks to actually integrate and bring up the actual insulation value of the properties. Um, Look at renewable energy integration, and what I sort of mean by that is solar panels
yeah.
going on houses. You've seen quite a lot of that.
Do you know what? There's loads going up on our street at the
Yeah.
moment.
I bet you haven't got many wind turbines at the moment, but
No,
that's
I'll keep an eye out. I'll keep an eye out. We have in Norfolk, but not in people's gardens.
but geothermal systems as well to generate clean energy. So
Yeah,
one of the jobs we did a couple of years ago now was a residential project out just north of the Downs, and with that we put down. Well, it was planned to be 4 boreholes, but it ended up being 7 for a
right.
ground source heat pump.
Gotcha.
But ultimately, they were born down. These were designed to go to 100 meters. The 4 of them, we ultimately put 7 in at about 60 meters, 70 meters each.
Yeah.
There was a sand seam at that level, so that's
Okay.
that's what capped that level down. But if we can incorporate that, the house that it was a barn conversion, which had been a residential. We regutted it all,
Yeah.
refitted it all through, and with that whole environment, insulated exterior with
Yeah.
ground source heat pumps to provide underfloor heating,
Yeah.
gave a great finish. Client was delighted with it as it was,
Yeah.
um, and it works. It holds it at a temperature year round, which
Sounds fantastic because it's funny you're mentioning things like that. I have a chronic illness, and I love the winter, but I really it challenges me, with cold. I feel the
Mhm.
cold more now. So I'm planning these things in my head. So for example, underfloor heating, and how can we make it sustainable so we can reduce costs for us over a period of time when we build the house. But I'm also looking at those things like, you've mentioned about the greenery on roofs and things like that, and it's like, I'm also thinking now that would be lovely for the warmth of the house and the things like that. But what actually if we turned the roof, because we're thinking flat, so slightly angled or flat roofs, what if we turned the roof into a garden terrace and then had that as well? And could that be done? And then I know, at some point, my good lady, she might have to be in a wheelchair. So we're looking at how we can make the environment lovely for her to live in. And then I'm thinking, okay, wider doors, just those simple things. And then the insulation in certain rooms, because we want an open plan, we want it a nice place for her to live in. But also, in the future, we want it to be our forever home. I'm doing it once, so I've got to think that far ahead and all of these different things. And these are, I think, with a younger generation, they're also thinking about their environment more. And also the places they visit. They want to go to places that are sustainable, that have those things that you could, that you've thought about over the last 20, 30 years, that your expertise can come to the table with. I think that's really vital. I'm really grateful you're sharing it.
And look at smart building systems, remote controls.
Yeah.
If you like, you've probably already got one on your car, or you start doing it. But you can integrate that, and it's about integration of all of these things into your existing. How you can adapt your existing, or when new's built, and that could be residential, it can be commercial, it can be office, whatever. In terms of that sort of things. And it's about reusing those renewable energy sources, so the wind or the geothermal. It's about getting, simple things. If you've got a new build, think about passive house principles.
Tell me about this. Go on, I'm interested.
Passive house is a design philosophy.
Okay.
And with that, it's a very, very simply, you might consider the building orientation.
Yeah.
In comparison to really about how you get natural lighting, so where you actually put your windows, solar shaded, that sort of thing that come through it. Think about natural light, as much as possible. Thinking about getting natural ventilation through the building. So that's all about the sort of passive house principles.
Gotcha.
There's more than that, but that's
that gives us a start,
in essence, that gives you a start as you go through. And if you can actually bring those through the sort of natural vent and everything else, you alleviate some of the need for mechanical into what you're actually doing, and you alleviate that need for the energy.
So what's your advice for either people in business or people going to build a home, or even renovate a barn like you've mentioned? What do we need to start thinking about?
Basic principles in terms of what you've got there. You've got water conservation, for instance. That's another sort of side of things. Have a look at water. So low flow toilets. Start putting bags in your cisterns rather than flushing away 6 litres of water. You flush away 4, and it's low flow and that sort of thing. It's all about that preservation and prevention, if you like.
I'd never even thought of that.
Yeah,
I've never thought of the amount of water that gets flushed away. It's just that's the toilet, that's what's in the house, or that's the one we bought when we built it. I think those things.
And possibly the next step of that is using grey water. So rather than using off the mains where it's all gone through your local water company and that sort of thing, recycle your rainwater. So rainwater cycle collection to flush your toilets. It's that sort of thing that you can incorporate into, and we're doing it on housing designs that we're working on at the moment. It's we probably looked at that 5-10 years ago, when we were working on things. So it's not brand new, but it's all things that and a philosophy of actually bringing in to actually help with decarbonisation of that. So what we're looking to do is take away from using gas primarily, going over to renewables, so renewable electrics, so wind power. So it's produced in its first instance by wind power, possibly offshore, that sort of thing. But reusing that and cutting down that reliability on the fossil fuels, which create carbon. Right,
gotcha.
Okay. the other thing is think about carbon capture. Is there any way we can reuse that carbon in different ways? But that's probably for another time, if you like,
for another
for
deeper
discussion.
podcast. I think personally, you've blown my mind today with the things that we can do. We can look at considerations I hadn't even had, but also because there'll be a lot of people saying, "Well, what's in it for me?" And I'm thinking right now, we can give back, we can create a more because what's in it for me is what's in it for my grandchildren. And a company I used to work with, they would say, I'm not thinking about me, I'm thinking about my grandchildren's grandchildren, and that's why they had a sustainable business. I'm thinking, you've hit me in the heartstrings, thinking, actually, do you know what?
You're 2 or 3 layered though. If you think about your grandchildren in that respect, which is 100% behind you on that, but also just think about what's in your pocket at the moment. If I'm using low energy lighting, I'm using less electric, so I'm thinking LED and using advanced lighting controls and that sort of thing to actually, whether that's a residential or commercial unit, think about those things. And in terms of that, if I'm using less electric, then I'm paying less out of my pocket.
Yes, and in
that's what's in it for me. So less water, which is me. Less electric, which is me. All of those are helping me in my pocket.
Makes perfect sense. And that's almost like the drop the mic moment to end the podcast on.
I'm good.
Julian, it's been great, and I think we should be looking at how we can bring this out to the wider world again on another episode, because you just it's just like, okay, yeah, actually it can really impact you right now in this moment.
And with that, it's up to us as showing our commitment to what we want to do to sort of stay informed and keep reading about the latest innovations and using sort of green building standards, if you like, to meet and exceed those sort of sustainable levels. So we've done works with BREEAM, we've done works on LEED, which is more American based, but they're green building standards effectively. So we've been through those processes and how they monitor it, and it's about getting more than just being the tick list exercise. It's about actually doing it and implementing it, which is something. The actual doing and implementing is a whole thing of our sort of ethos and culture within Julian Church, and that's what I want to push forward. So.
And makes perfect sense. I was just about to say, I know we've talked about this stuff on other podcasts and how it all leads in with the culture and the vision for the company, and obviously you guys being B Corp as well. Yeah.
It's part of that ethos. So, yeah, very much so.
Brilliant. I'm looking forward to more conversations on this.
No, definitely. And if anyone out there wants to have that conversation, easiest way, just give me a call. Or send me an email, or catch me through LinkedIn or similar, and I'd be delighted to have that conversation.
Awesome. Julian, thanks for the podcast today. It's been fantastic and really eye-opening.
Thank you very much.